So Meghan Markle and Prince Harry just got caught in this absolutely wild situation involving their kids. And I have to tell you, the more you look at the documented evidence, the more disturbing the whole thing becomes. We're not talking about theories here or speculation or what some anonymous source told some tabloid. We're talking about a candle. An actual physical candle with Archie and Lilibet's names printed right on it, available for purchase through the As Ever brand. And that candle tells you everything you need to know about how these children are being used. Not included in a family project, not given a cute little moment of feeling special, but commercially deployed as brand assets by two parents who apparently cannot see the screaming contradiction between what they say publicly and what they do when the cameras aren't rolling at a World Health Organization event. Before we get into all of this, real quick, if you want the kind of coverage that actually goes through the documented record instead of just repeating whatever PR statement got released this week, hit subscribe to Windsor Weekly. It helps the channel, and it means you won't miss when we dig into things like this. All right, let's get into it. So here's what's actually happening. Meghan Markle has positioned herself as this crusader for child online safety, right? She gave that whole speech in Geneva, very serious, very well constructed, talking about algorithmic exposure and engagement loops and how children are being commercially exploited on platforms designed to capture attention. And the speech itself was good. The cause is real. Nobody serious is arguing that child digital safety isn't an urgent policy issue. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. The person standing on that stage delivering that message is the same person who had Shop My Page enabled on her Instagram account, meaning followers viewing images of her children could click through and purchase the exact items those children were wearing. And every single purchase generated income directly for Meghan Markle. That's not an interpretation. That's how the feature functions. That's what it was doing on her account. And the feature only disappeared after people started noticing and criticizing it. The contradiction is so obvious, it's almost embarrassing to have to point it out. You cannot stand on a global stage and lecture the world about protecting children from commercial exploitation in digital spaces while simultaneously monetizing your own children's presence on those exact same platforms. You just can't. The math doesn't work. And what makes this genuinely infuriating rather than just hypocritical is that Meghan Markle clearly knows what she's doing. She's not confused about how Instagram works. She's not unclear on what Shop My Page does. She's a sophisticated adult who has built an entire commercial operation around the Sussex brand, and the children are a core part of that brand, whether anyone wants to admit it or not. Dickie Arbiter has been watching all of this unfold, and his perspective on this matters in a way that random Twitter commentary simply doesn't. Arbiter spent 5 years as Princess Diana's press secretary. He was there during the most intense media scrutiny any royal figure has faced in modern history. He watched Diana navigate the question of how to raise children in the public eye, while genuinely protecting them from the machinery that wanted to consume them. And what Arbiter saw Diana do was specific and deliberate. Theme parks, fast food restaurants, ordinary places that had nothing to do with palace protocol. Diana wanted William and Harry to have something resembling a normal childhood, and she fought for that consistently. Not performatively, not when cameras happened to be around, but as an actual principle she refused to compromise on. The result was 2 children who grew into adults with genuine warmth and relatability because they were allowed to be children before they were required to be public figures. Arbiter looks at what Meghan and Harry are doing now, and the word he uses is ruthlessly. Not carelessly, not accidentally, not, oh, they just didn't think about how it might look. Ruthlessly, with full awareness of what each decision means and what outcomes it serves. That word coming from that person with that specific professional background carries weight that no amount of PR spin can neutralize. Arbiter knows what responsible royal child privacy looks like because he helped build and deliver it. And he is saying directly that what's happening now doesn't resemble that model in any meaningful way. The candle is the starkest example because you can't explain it away as a spontaneous family moment. An image can be described as candid. A product with a child's name printed on it is a deliberate commercial decision made by adults who sat down and chose to monetize their children's identities. Archie is 7 years old. Lilibet is 5. They cannot read a contract. They cannot negotiate terms. They cannot understand intellectual property. They cannot consent and cannot meaningfully consent at their ages to having their names and royal titles attached to an item being sold commercially to the public. Any adult who claims otherwise is either lying or has completely lost touch with what a 7-year-old is developmentally capable of understanding. The defense that it's a family project meant to make them feel included is almost worse because it treats a 5-year-old's emotional needs as interchangeable with a commercial transaction. A 5-year-old can feel included by helping in a kitchen. A 5-year-old cannot feel included by having their name monetized on a product they don't understand, being sold to strangers they'll never meet. Duncan Larcombe has covered this family for decades and knows Harry personally, and his observation gets at something even more uncomfortable: the timing pattern. The children's appearances in public content do not follow the rhythm of normal parental sharing. They intensify after negative coverage. They appear at commercial launch moments. They coincide with strategic points in the brand cycle. When the as ever brand needed emotional warmth that product shots alone couldn't generate, suddenly there were the children in domestic kitchen scenes. When negative press needed to be countered with something softer, birthday tributes and family glimpses appeared right on schedule. When Harry received solo positive coverage from Time magazine that didn't mention Meghan, Meghan posted within hours, featuring their daughter and a romantic image of herself with Harry. One instance of that timing could be coincidence. 4 instances could be explained away, but the pattern across multiple years, across multiple commercial cycles, is harder to dismiss without willfully ignoring what's right in front of you. Larcombe describes it as a content calendar rather than a family album. That's the language of someone who has spent decades observing how celebrity and royal content strategy actually functions. And he's telling you that what he sees fits the strategy model. The children are content, they're deployed when the brand needs them, they're kept in reserve when it doesn't. That's not how a parent shares family moments. That's how a media operation manages assets. The domain names add another layer that makes the whole thing even harder to defend. The Sussex household registered domain names associated with their children before those children were old enough for school. You register a domain name because you anticipated having commercial value and you want to control that value rather than allowing someone else to claim it first. That's a commercial act with a specific commercial logic. It's not a protective parental measure. If you're concerned about your children's privacy, you don't create additional digital infrastructure connected to their identities. You certainly don't do it before they're old enough to understand what a domain name is. The fact that these domains exist tells you that someone in that household was thinking about the commercial potential of Archie and Lilibet's names years before any candle went on sale. What makes this genuinely painful to watch is Harry's position in all of it. Harry has built a significant part of his public identity around specific convictions about exploitation and privacy. He's been the most vocal critic of media exploitation of private individuals, of families being commercialized without their knowledge or consent, of press intrusion into children's lives, of the systems that prioritized institutional reputation over individual well-being, including his own experience as a child. The memoir, the legal cases, the public interviews, all of it rests on a foundation of stated belief in privacy, in the protection of children from exploitation, in accountability for those who deploy private individuals without their consent. And yet the candle is on sale, the domain names are registered. The Shop My Page feature was active until criticism forced its removal. The timing pattern that Larcombe describes as a content calendar is visible in the public record for anyone willing to look at it honestly. Larcombe's point isn't that Harry is enthusiastically driving any of this. His point is that Harry isn't stopping it, and a man who genuinely holds Harry's stated convictions about exploitation and privacy, rather than holding them performatively, would be expected to draw a specific and visible line. That line hasn't been drawn. A person's convictions about exploitation of children are most meaningfully tested by what they allow to happen to their own children when commercial incentives point in a different direction. That's an uncomfortable observation, but it's also fair in the specific sense that you can't claim to be a victim of childhood media exploitation while simultaneously participating in the commercial deployment of your own children's identities. The commercial logic running through the Sussex operation is worth being direct about because it explains the incentive structure regardless of what any individual decision was intended to achieve. Meghan's most commercially successful content and projects have all involved the royal connection in a direct and central way. The Netflix documentary generated enormous viewership because it was about a royal departure. The institution, the crisis, the content that hasn't centered on that connection has performed dramatically less well, as the 2025 cooking show's viewing figures demonstrated pretty clearly. Archie and Lilibet are the most personal and most permanent form of the royal connection that remains available to the Sussex commercial operation as content and brand elements. They are the children of a duke and duchess. Archie is 7th in line to the throne. Lilibet carries the name of the late queen. They are not simply a young couple's children in the way that most children are simply their parents' children. They are the ongoing and permanent evidence of a specific institutional connection that the commercial operation depends on for its relevance and its revenue. That commercial reality doesn't prove the children are being deliberately exploited. What it means is that the incentive structure points toward more of their presence in the content rather than less, and that the financial and commercial pressure runs in that direction regardless of the intentions behind any individual post. Whether that incentive is being consciously followed or simply producing its natural effect as the path of least resistance is a question only the people making the daily decisions can answer honestly. What the outside observer can document is the outcome. The pattern of deployment that Arbiter describes with the word ruthlessly, and that Larcombe describes as a content calendar rather than a family album. The Geneva dimension deserves specific attention because the contradiction between that speech and the documented posting pattern is the most visible expression of the broader problem. Meghan's speech described the mechanisms of algorithmic harm, the relentless attention, the engagement loops designed to maximize time on platform regardless of what that does to the viewer, the commercial exploitation of children's presence on platforms built around capturing and holding attention. All of that is accurate. All of that is important. The problem is that the person describing those mechanisms is simultaneously participating in them with her own children as the content. Her team's defense rests on the argument that the children's faces are obscured or only partially visible, and therefore the protection principle is being honored. Multiple child safety experts have challenged that framing on two specific grounds. The first is that face obscuring does not obscure presence or prevent the building of a digital footprint. A child whose birthday is shared publicly, whose home setting and domestic environment are visible in post, whose parents' commercial cycle they appear in regularly, whose name is on commercial products available for sale, and whose clothing was previously linked to purchase pages is not functionally private regardless of whether their face is fully visible or partially out of frame. The algorithmic exposure Meghan described as dangerous is not primarily about facial recognition technology. It's about the accumulation of a digital footprint, the building of a public identity around a person who has not chosen to have one. A partially hidden face does not prevent a digital footprint from being built around a child. The second point is even more counterintuitive and comes directly from child safety professionals. Partial visibility can actually increase rather than decrease unwanted attention from concerning individuals. A partly visible child shown from behind with a face out of frame in ways that suggest there is more to see generates specific kinds of attention that full transparency might not. The mystery element for certain kinds of problematic attention can be a draw rather than a deterrent. The argument that face obscuring is equivalent to privacy protection is not uniformly supported by child safety research, and some experts have specifically noted this in the context of how the Sussex approach works. If you're so concerned about the anonymity of your children, don't photograph them and don't put them online. Put them in an album, keep them on your phone, keep them on your computer, but don't put them online. It's genuinely that simple. The consent question connects to all of this in ways that make the commercial deployment even harder to justify. Commercial use of a child's name, image, or royal title involves a minor who cannot meaningfully consent to commercial exploitation of their identity. Most jurisdictions have developed specific protections around the commercial use of minors' likenesses and identities for exactly this reason. Children lack the legal and cognitive capacity to meaningfully consent, which is why adults are generally not allowed to deploy children's identities commercially without appropriate oversight. Whether the specific Sussex commercial decisions fall within or outside those protections is a legal question that hasn't been publicly addressed, and the fact that the question exists at all is itself notable. The Diana comparison matters here not as nostalgia or sentiment, but as a practical framework. Diana's model produced visible and lasting outcomes. Children who grew into adults with genuine public warmth and relatability. That outcome wasn't accidental, and it wasn't mysterious. It was the product of a specific and deliberate approach to keeping them ordinary, private, and human first, while they were young enough for that protection to shape who they became rather than being shaped by the commercial apparatus surrounding their parents. The current model is different in a specific and documentable way, not because sharing family moments is wrong. Diana shared family moments throughout her children's childhood, and no serious observer argues otherwise. The difference is that the moments being shared now are attached to a commercial infrastructure in ways that Diana's were not. The children's names, titles, and identities have been registered and deployed as brand assets in ways that go meaningfully beyond family sharing into something that has a different name and a different set of implications. Harry's situation in all of this is the part that sits most uncomfortably because there's a genuine tragedy embedded in it. When Meghan was growing up, she dreamed of Hollywood stardom and being a big person on a big stage. When Harry was growing up, he dreamed of being anonymous and not recognized everywhere he goes. The reality is, and it's painful to watch from people who've dealt with Harry since he was a teenager, Meghan is living her dream while Harry is living his nightmare. The man who wanted nothing more than to escape the relentless public attention has married someone who appears to need it, and the children are now caught in the middle of that fundamental tension. What makes this particularly grim is that the children's commercial deployment doesn't just affect them in some abstract future sense. It's happening right now, in real time, while they're 7 and 5 years old and have absolutely no ability to understand what's being done with their identities. Every time a birthday photograph goes up, every time a domestic scene appears in the brand's content cycle, every time their names are used to sell something, a digital footprint is being built that they will inherit whether they want it or not. They will grow up and discover that their childhood was monetized, that their names were registered as domains before they could read, that their images were linked to purchase pages, that their presence was strategically deployed to counter negative press and boost commercial launches. How does a teenager process that? How does a young adult make sense of parents who publicly advocated for child digital safety while privately building a commercial operation that depended on their children's identities? The Newsweek defense article is itself a revealing data point. If the contradiction between the Geneva speech and the posting pattern felt comfortable rather than uncomfortable, it wouldn't have required a prepared lawyer-reviewed statement to manage. The fact that it required that kind of careful management is an acknowledgement, however indirect, that the tension is real, and that it was expected to land publicly. And 18 days after the Geneva speech, the birthday photograph of Lilibet went up. The cycle continued exactly as before. The speech changed nothing about the actual practice, because the practice serves a commercial function that the speech was never intended to disrupt. Here's what I keep coming back to. The question isn't whether parents can share photographs of their children. They can. No one arguing this position is saying they can't. The question isn't whether the children are loved. They are. The question isn't whether Meghan genuinely cares about online child safety. She may genuinely hold those convictions while also deploying her children commercially, and those two things can simultaneously be true without either canceling the other. The question is whether the documented commercial deployment of these specific children, their names on products, their images linked to purchase pages, their titles registered as domain names, their presence strategically deployed in the brand's commercial cycle, constitutes something different from family sharing. And whether when a person who advocates publicly for child digital safety has a documented pattern of commercial child deployment that experts describe as inconsistent with the principles they're advocating, the advocacy itself loses credibility and effectiveness. That's not primarily a problem for Meghan's reputation as an individual public figure. It's a problem for the cause itself. Child digital safety is a serious and genuinely urgent policy area that requires serious, credible advocates capable of speaking to legislators, technology companies, and parents with sustained authority when the most prominent celebrity face of that advocacy is subject to documented and specific criticism about their own practice. The cause becomes easier for the industry to dismiss. That's Arbiter's real concern expressed through the word ruthlessly, and it's Larcombe's real concern expressed through the content calendar framing. Both of them are describing the same underlying observation from their respective positions of professional experience. The children's presence in the Sussex commercial operation is not incidental to it. It is structural. It runs through the candle and the domain names and the Shop My Page feature and the timing pattern and the Geneva contradiction and the defensive PR responses that always seem to follow whenever someone points out what's actually happening. The pattern is consistent enough across enough instances that coincidence becomes an increasingly demanding explanation. When you observe that children appear in content reliably at specific types of moments, commercial launches, reputation repair cycles, solo partner coverage, and when you observe that the appearances increase in frequency as other brand assets perform less well, you're observing the behavior of a content calendar. The question isn't whether that description is harsh. The question is whether it's accurate. And looking at the documented record, the candle with their names on it available for purchase right now, the domain names registered before they started school, the Shop My Page feature that turned their clothing into clickable purchase opportunities, the timing pattern that tracks the commercial cycle rather than the rhythm of family life, it's hard to conclude anything else. Arbiter watched Diana do this differently. He watched her fight for her children's privacy, not as a talking point, but as a daily practice. He watched her make choices that prioritize their ordinariness over their commercial potential. And now he's watching the opposite approach, and he's calling it what it is. Ruthless. Not careless, not well-intentioned, but poorly executed. Ruthless. With full awareness of what each decision means and what outcomes it serves. That word from that person with that background should land with the weight it deserves. This isn't tabloid criticism from someone with no knowledge of how royal childhood actually functions when it's done right. This is someone who was in the room, who helped build the alternative, who knows exactly what he's looking at, and who has chosen his words carefully. The children are 7 and 5. They have no idea that their names are on a candle being sold to strangers. They have no idea that domain names connected to their identities were registered before they could read. They have no idea that their presence in family photographs serves a commercial function in a brand strategy that depends on their royal connection for its relevance and revenue. And they won't know any of this until they're old enough to look back and understand what was done. At that point, the digital footprint will already be built. The public identity will already exist. The commercial exploitation will already have happened. And no amount of Geneva speeches or lawyer-reviewed statements will undo any of it.